Did you know that federal funding makes up 10.9% of North Carolina's public school funding, and lowering this budget any further can impact thousands of educators and students in the nation's ninth largest state, as noted by Wooten from the Center Square. Federal funding is very important because it allows thousands of students in rural areas to pursue an education that is significant to their success in the future. Therefore, the U.S. Department of Education should provide more funding to rural schools in North Carolina because it is necessary for students to have more access to valuable resources, programs, and staff that help them with their learning experience. In other words, cutting federal education funding to rural schools prevents students from having access to valuable resources and programs. And in order to prevent schools from losing staff and educational tools, the U.S. Department of Education should give rural schools enough funding to support them. And lastly, by providing sufficient federal funding to rural schools, staff can benefit and provide proper learning to students without limiting access to educational resources and opportunities. Now, let's talk about the deeper issue of cutting federal education funding for public schools. Cutting federal education funding to rural public schools prevents students from having access to valuable resources and programs. For example, North Carolina ranks low in school funding compared to other states. And in this chart, as shown by the Education Law Center, North Carolina ranks 50 out of 51 states that provide funding to public schools in 2025. This chart also shows that federal funding has a great impact on public school funding, in which the U.S. Department of Education provides 18% of funding that allows students to have access to resources. Additionally, students who attend rural schools need access to valuable resources such as teachers and staff. As LeBouc from CE think tank Newswire reports, North Carolina enrolled about 1.55 million students and employed around 174,000 staff in public schools. Public schools are one of the largest employers in North Carolina. This shows how important it is for students who are enrolled in public schools to have enough teachers to help them learn. Not only do federal cuts to public schools affect teachers, but it also affects programs that assist students with disabilities and those who are low income. LeBouc also notes that, quote, the state also distributes funds to educate specific populations, such as special needs or at-risk students, and provides supports to districts with particular characteristics, such as small size or low wealth, end quote. This suggests that rural public schools that have different programs to help with the needs of students need additional funding in order to provide extra support, such as tutoring, after school academic programs, special education services, and ESL programs. So, what can we do to improve federal funding for public schools in North Carolina? In order to prevent schools from losing staff and educational tools, the U.S. Department of Education should provide more funding to support them. According to the Targeted News Service, quote, the No Cuts to Public Schools Act would safeguard funds that allow public schools to serve low-income students, English learners, students with disabilities, homeless students, and students attending rural schools, end quote. By passing the No Cuts to Public Schools Act, public schools are ensured that they will receive funding to continue to support students. Public schools may also use the funding to hire qualified staff who educate the students. For example, Lubeck notes that classroom teacher allotment allows districts to hire the best educated and most credentialed faculty that will give students a knowledgeable educational experience. Public schools that hired qualified staff help students get the education they need by using different teaching strategies that help them retain the knowledge they learn, such as hands-on activities, group presentations, and taking physical notes in class. Now, think about how students and teachers can benefit from more federal funding. By providing sufficient school funding to rural schools, staff can benefit and provide proper learning to students without limiting their access to educational resources and opportunities. Imagine students who have access to valuable educational resources, such as Canva LMS and newer devices to help them keep up with their classes. Now, imagine students not having access to these resources and opportunities because of federal funding cuts to public education, which prevents them from gaining efficient knowledge. Taking this into perspective, we should find ways to make sure that public schools will receive federal funding. Overall, the U.S. Department of Education should continue to fund rural schools because it allows students to use resources, programs, and staff that are important for their learning experiences. In order to ensure that public schools receive the funding they deserve, please support policies that focus on students who are low income, homeless, and attend public schools in rural areas by contacting local Congress members. To end on a good note, we can all make a difference and help students because everyone should be able to have an education. Thank you.